We're rolling. Hello, Gerard.
Hi, Rod.
How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. You?
Good. So we're here today to talk about this book here, right? Justice by Michael Sandel.
That's right.
And you have prepared some, like an outline of two of the chapters, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That we can talk about.
Yes. One of them's libertarianism,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is the ideas of John Rawls, an American philosopher. Shall I take it away?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So libertarianism, Sandel states that the richest 1% in America own a third of the wealth. And so you might think, well, why not spread it out, right? And the libertarians have two objections to this. One is that if you tax people too much, then it reduces the incentive to work. And so, in fact, you'll have a smaller economic pie. And in fact, everyone would suffer. And the other reason is that it violates their right to do what they choose. It's their money. It shouldn't be taken for redistributive purposes. So, yeah, libertarians think that the state should only really be there for enforcing contracts, protecting private property, and keeping the peace, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Certainly not in redistribution. He mentions three things that they reject. Libertarianism. One is laws to protect people, such as seatbelts. It should be your own choice.
Paternalistic.
Second one is moral. Sorry?
What is it? Oh, I just said paternalism.
Yes.
Right? The soft paternalism of the state. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And the second one's moral legislation, such as against prostitution or gay rights. And that can be people from the left, right? They're very much for freedoms for those sort of things. And then the third one is redistribution. Yeah, I mean, rich people can absolutely redistribute their money, but it's up to them, not the state. So.
Right.
And a lot of these views came from Friedrich Hayek,
Sure.
the economist. He said, any attempt to bring greater equality is bound to be coercive and destructive to a free society. So, yeah, I think that's a real main idea, that the more the state gets involved, the less freedoms people have. Probably true.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he says that the crux of libertarianism is about self-ownership. If I own myself, then I must own my labor. And then I'm entitled to do what I want with the fruits of the labor. And they see a moral continuity from taxation that goes then to forced labor and then to slavery. So it's a slippery slope for the libertarians. And then just the final point is, you could say, well, don't the poor need money more, right? Surely redistribution would just be better for society. But libertarians make the point about the kidney analogy, that if somebody needs a kidney, I mean, we've got two, we can spare one. Shouldn't the state just take our kidneys? Same sort of thing. It's our body, it's our right not to do it. So there we go. That's libertarianism in a nutshell from Sandel.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, to counter that is John Rawls, who was an American political philosopher. And he has a great idea about the veil of ignorance. Sorry, yes, the veil of ignorance, that's the right word.
Yes.
When making a social contract, just as a thought experiment, imagine that you didn't know your gender, your class, your ethnicity, your religion, your education, what family you're from. You just complete ignorance. If that was so, then he asked, what would the social contract be? What would people's principles be? And he thinks, this is Rawls, thinks that people would reject utilitarianism which is the greatest happiness for the greatest number. And of course, that some people are left out, right? Some people could be an oppressed minority in that idea. So you wouldn't go for that in this veil of ignorance idea. And he thinks you wouldn't go for libertarianism either, because you could easily be the one in poverty relying on handouts from the rich. So what does he think would be the principles? Number one, free speech and freedom of religion in this thought experiment. You'd certainly go for that. And you would also have social and economic policies that advantage the least well off, because you could easily be in that part of society, right? And very importantly, not equal distribution. He doesn't think that people would go for that. He thinks people still want to earn money. And in fact, paying doctors more is actually good for society, because doctors will help people, right? So that's that. What else? Yeah, one of his main ideas: only those social and economic inequalities are permitted to work to the benefit of the least advantageous members of society. So he's not against wealth. In fact, wealth is fine as long as there is a progressive tax system, because that actually does help people out, right? And if you compare where everyone's equal to this system where there's some wealthy, actually you'd be better off in the second system, because there's a progressive tax system. Then he talks about other societies, such as the feudal system where you have serfs, peasants, and the nobility, kings. Total accident of birth, right? Just luck as to where you are. And the same with the caste system in India. And he also argues that, yeah, libertarianism is the same kind of thing. You're very much reliant on who your family is, your education. Some people get a great education, some people get a less good education. So, yeah, he sees it as arbitrary from a moral point of view. And then this is where it gets really interesting. The meritocracy, which many people would say, well, surely that's, imagine that everyone has access to the same education and the same family background. Surely that's fair to be paid more for what you do. But he says this still falls short of justice, because, again, it's still a lottery. For example, your intelligence, that's just an accident of birth, isn't it? The era you're born in, I don't know if he mentions it in the book, but for example, if Michael Jordan was born in Renaissance Europe, he might not be so successful. So very much luck as to intelligence, time you were born. And his answer to this is he encouraged the gifted, but with the understanding that the rewards those talents reap belong to the community. So whatever luck you've had in regards to intelligence or skill, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the community. I like that idea. A common asset. And then he just comes up with some possible objections to Rawls. Oh, the main one is effort. I mean, okay, you've got intelligence and all this kind of thing, but surely effort, hard work should be rewarded. But even this, he says that, for example, if you're the firstborn in the family, you'd have a stronger work ethic. And he gives an example of, this is Sandel in his Harvard course. He asks the firstborns to put their hands up, and it's like 80% of his class. So again, it's luck in some respect, how hard you work. So yeah, and this is the last point. To sort of sum it up, the natural distribution of talents is neither just nor unjust. However, what is just or unjust is the way that institutions deal with these facts. And that is that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gerard.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Any thoughts, Rod?
Well, which one would you like to start with?
Well,
Libertarianism
let's start with. Oh God, yeah,
or Rawls? I mean, Rawls is like juicy, right?
it's a great idea.
It is a good idea, and it's
I love
very.
that veil of ignorance. Yeah, idea.
Me too. Me too. And I think he's right. If you could control for any form of knowledge of where you stand in society, we would probably all vote for take care of the neediest. Right. So yeah, that's a very clever way of driving that point home, I thought. Yeah, I just wonder how it would work in practice, though. Right. I mean, I could imagine a lot of people in this country calling it communist or something like that. So
Well, they would call it communist, but it clearly
they,
isn't.
they do, yeah. Well,
It clearly isn't because,
no,
as I say,
right, but the redistribution thing, that's a tough one. But he's thought it through. I think he's really thought it all through. Like, including just the thing that you were just talking about, the hard work thing. There are millions and millions of people who work very, very, very hard and don't make a lot of money, right? So hard work, all right. Well, if you believe that hard work should confer those kinds of benefits, then pay the McDonald's worker, right? I mean, are they working less hard? So yeah. So I think he's really thought it through pretty well with how to redistribute it. It's logically very sound, right? And it's morally very sound too. So.
yeah, morally, absolutely. Yeah, there's an expression, this equality of opportunity, right? That's often bandied about, which obviously Rawls is against. But I heard a good argument against that. It's like having a game of football or soccer, and you have one team who's the under 12s against a team of adults. Well, the rules are exactly the same, right? They've actually got the same opportunity, but you'd never support that because it's completely unfair, and that's the system we have.
Yeah.
But you say how it would work. What about? I was thinking Scandinavia seems to be the pin-up boys for redistribution. Have very high tax. Do you think?
Yeah,
I
Bernie
often
Sanders.
think, can't we just put that system around the world? Would it work? Do they have special conditions?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Those being? Yes. Well, you have a social contract, right? I mean, the people. I don't hear a lot of protests about it, right? Like, I don't hear people agitating against this welfare system that they've created, right? It seems to work, and people seem happy with it. And the people at the highest level of society don't seem all that bothered by it. I mean, I don't hear that anyway, right? I don't hear complaints about it, or like, we're gonna go back to some conservative, like the Friedrich Hayek kind of way of thinking about it, right? Which is very libertarian.
But why is it successful there and not wanted in other places?
Because that contract doesn't. Well, if I just compare it to the United States, there are too many people that actively don't want that, right? I mean, here you have an actual debate. I'm saying there you have a consensus, right? Whereas here you don't. And I don't think you have one in England either, right? I don't think even Korea has one where you are, where you're at now. But like, that sort of tension is really what keeps sort of the conservative eternally in control somehow, right? Of the whole thing. So. But, yeah.
Yes, and obviously they're very well. There's a few things about the Scandinavian countries. Small population
Uh-huh.
is something that's
Yeah.
different.
And they have
Wealthy.
very restrictive immigration laws, right? So, it's hard to move into those countries, and that works to their advantage, right? That's part of their social contract too. We're going to stay and we're going to take care of our own in the best way we can. And but here in this country, there's a whole other mentality, right, of conservatism that is just utterly opposed to that whole idea of taxing people that much.
And that comes even from the poorer people support that, right?
In some cases, yeah, but the rich do, of course. Yeah. Oh, you mean the poor people support Scandinavia? You mean? Oh, I
No,
see.
no.
Yeah.
Poor people support don't tax the rich too much because it's not fair, and we could be that person. We wouldn't want to be taxed, right?
Yeah. The moral desert, right? That was in the chapter. The
Almost
moral desert. Yeah.
Self-harming.
Self-harming.
Yeah, they're voting for something that is against their interests, right?
Right. Well, it depends how you look at it, right? If freedom is the only thing that you care about, right? If that's your only value, then then you're getting what you're aiming for, right?
Yeah.
But if you're looking for a more just society that's more collective in its outlook, a lot of people just equate any kind of that as being anti-freedom. It's against human freedom to do that, and there are just so many people who think that way, right? So that's why I don't think the Scandinavian thing could really be implemented here. And even if we did temporarily get it right, the pendulum would swing back, right, and then it would all get undone, and the things would get repealed and all that. So nothing ever.
Yeah, it's just when you look at all things like healthcare and happiness, they always seem to be on the top, don't they? So that's why it seems attractive to me, at least.
Yeah, I know.
But why not? You're right.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there should be a safety net that, where nobody should have to worry, because it's really needless suffering at this point, right? I mean, we could construct a system that's not even socialist. I mean, it would be partially socialistic, right? But it already is, right? I mean, we have Medicaid here, which is a huge government program that millions of people are on, including Republicans, right? I mean, so it's.
I was so surprised by a statistic that I found out recently, that America's percentage of GDP for healthcare is something like 16%. I don't know, something like that, and it's more than Germany. Or that's quite sad, isn't it? That you spend so much money and yet such a lot of people don't have access to good health. Is that just the lobbyists and the power of these healthcare companies, insurance companies? I mean, that's very sad, because you wouldn't think that Americans spent that much, but they do.
I know, but the people too. There are a lot of people who are not, in government, who also are opposed to having any form of socialized medicine, ideologically. And I'm talking about just like rank and file people, right? There are millions, even though in many cases they're actually recipients of it. So, so that is, I mean, there's definitely some blindness there for sure. But I read a couple of years ago, and this was something I thought was really interesting, from Steven Pinker. He made a really, really interesting point that America, we're very anti-socialistic here, like most people are, or a large number of people are. But when you look at all of the government programs that we have that actually do redistribute wealth, we're actually number two in the world. So
That's amazing.
we're an enormously redistributive country, actually, but it's all done through, it's just so hodgepodge that you don't see it that way. And in this country, corporations have traditionally been responsible for providing healthcare coverage, right? The insurance. So that's redistributive too. And so that was a privatized way of getting that done. And for a long, long time, that actually worked. That was the way I grew up. When I was a kid, that was the way my parents got medical, insurance that way through their corporations. And it was reliable and easy to use, and all that. But then corporations started cutting back on all of their extras, right? Because they started going to more of like a contract gig economy, right, where you're on contract, and so we just pay you a salary, but there's no benefits included, and that's become more and more normal now. And so now we're in the worst possible situation imaginable, which is why I think we need a socialized system. Totally. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't just have an all-out,
Well, if you're spending that much money, you'd think, yeah.
But it's all going into corporate, hands, right? That's the thing. We're spending all this money, and great profits are being made. So it's a very, very, we've got the worst of all possible worlds here when it comes to the healthcare system.
Yes, it seems that way.
Except for one thing, we have the actual best quality of care. Right? So
as long as it's covered,
yeah. So that's why we have a lot of people travel here for special surgeries and stuff, because there seems to be the most expertise here in terms of medicine. So
let's talk about libertarianism then.
Okay.
This would be Thatcher and Reagan's. Well, it became more libertarian, didn't it? Less state intervention. Many would blame that policy for the growing inequalities.
Which policy? Say it again.
Thatcher and Reagan.
Oh, I see. Right.
Less state intervention following Hayek's.
Yeah. Let that bull free, right? We're gonna let this bull loose. We're gonna let this bull loose. That was Reagan.
Right.
At the New York Stock.
Okay. Is that okay? Yeah. What are your thoughts on libertarianism?
Well, there's certainly some things that I agree with in terms of people should be free to live as they choose, right? I mean, identity-wise, you should be whatever you want to be. So I think people should be given a great deal of autonomy, but not totally.
By the way, if I could
go ahead.
Jump in there. The whole idea that you own yourself.
Yeah.
Is not a belief that a lot of people around the world hold, right? It is such an individualistic belief, and so a lot of cultures think the body belongs to God, right? So you shouldn't disrespect in some way. So it is different. We in the West are different from many others. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Well, I hold that view actually.
That the body belongs to God.
Well, or that it's not really yours, right? It's another one of those things that John Rawls talks about, right? The body, you have nothing to do with your body, right? I mean, you did not. I'm sorry, but the greatest genius who's ever lived didn't construct their own body, consciously, right? I mean, there is a case to be made from a spiritual standpoint that it certainly was, but so to say that like my body is mine, I mean, you're part of a species, right? That's part of almost like a matrix, right? Where matter has somehow reached a point where it's become self-aware, right? And so, but that body is yeah, I mean, it's like every other human body, right? And so you're just part of a certain species that have bodies that are almost the same, right? And so,
Yeah.
uh, that's just one. And then from a more spiritual, mystical perspective, yeah, I mean, there's the body's not yours at all, right? I mean, yeah, but I like how subtle he was in the book about it, right? Because he kind of takes both. He shows you how in some ways you are the owner of your body, and in some ways you're not. I think he was making the point that it's not total ownership, right? Like you are partially the owner of your body, right? Like you are free to choose to give a kidney or not, right? If you want to, and that is yours to, right? Yeah. So,
But not true.
but not what? But not two, right? Right. Once you come up to the second kidney, right, then the game changes quite a bit, right? Because you're basically electing for suicide, right? And so, um, then the question becomes: do you have, can you choose to do that? And then, of course, you need another person to enter into a social contract to do it for you, right?
Yeah.
So,
I suppose the most attractive thing for me is this freedom idea that if a state puts these high taxes on people that people don't want, then that is a loss of freedom, isn't it? And so,
yeah,
yes, if everyone, as you said, in Scandinavia, if most people are for it, then it's okay. But if they're not, then I suppose there is some truth in that you do lose freedoms when it's
yeah,
forced upon you. Yeah.
right. Well, I mean, it's just you just have to. It's the balancing somehow the freedom of the individual versus the freedom of the community, right? Because what Scandinavia has discovered is that people do become more free actually when it's when they don't have to worry so much about um, how they're going to pay for like a healthcare thing. I mean, it should be affordable to everybody, right? And so to have those good systems in place for the people does actually make there. I think there's an argument to be made that it does actually enhance freedom when you have the right systems in place. But they have to be the right ones, not just you don't just blindly go for it. You got to really think through what should be implemented and what should not. Right? It's like, see, here's the thing: the U.S. Constitution was pretty threadbare, right? And so, the conservative view is we just kind of keep it as threadbare as possible, right? You want to have as few laws as possible, right? I mean, that just seems to be the view. So now we're in a time where we've heard that the Supreme Court is poised to overturn Roe v. Wade, right? And from a legal perspective, now, I think abortion should be legal across the country, but the legal case for turning it over is actually very, very strong. From a purely legal perspective, that the conservatives are actually right. From a moral, practical perspective, it's not a good idea, right? Because I mean, yeah, it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be a rough path forward.
Well, it's certainly anti-libertarian, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's your body, it's your choice. Well, that I think we'll have to leave for another day.
Sure.
The legal side.
Yeah, right.
But it sounds good. Shall we wrap it up, Rod? Anything you want to say on
the libertarian side or the John Rawls? No, I'm just glad I'm glad you suggested it, because I especially like the Rawls chapter.
Yeah.
I mean, just one last thing about the libertarian thing is, I've always had a hard time accepting it as a whole. Like, this is the way we should be as society. Like, I understand that the individual needs to have a great deal of autonomy and freedom in the world, but you know, we do live in a society, and I think that the libertarian view, as much as I want to believe in it, you know, because it sounds so attractive, like unlimited freedom or whatever, right? But I don't think it's practical, you know, and I never have. And I've had a lot of conversations with it with a good friend of mine from high school who's very libertarian, and I've heard his arguments so many times, and they're just what we saw here. And I'm just like, yeah, I get it, but the reality is that we live in a society, you know. So, you know, and the individuals somehow have to, you know, make that work, you know. So,
yeah. Okay. Let's finish it there, Rod.
yeah, gonna stop it right here.